Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 195, titled Deep Listening Changes Everything, with Emily Kasriel. If you've ever felt like grief made you impossible to reach, like no one could hear the ache in your chest or the silence behind your words, this episode is for you. My guest today is Emily Kasriel, whose work on deep listening is not only reshaping how we speak and hear one another, but also how we face the hardest stories within ourselves. As a mediator, executive coach, and former BBC journalist, Emily developed an 8-step framework for deep listening that invites us to become attuned to our own pain and to others with compassion, curiosity, and clarity. Whether your grief shows up as a distance in a relationship or disconnection from yourself, Emily's method of listening offers a path to witness, repair, and reconnect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. I'm your host, Mandy, of course, and today I am joined by Emily Kasriel, executive coach, mediator. She's a former BBC journalist and the author of Deep Listening, Transform Your Relationships with Family, Friends, and Foes. Her work has been praised by the likes of Adam Grant and Jon Kabat-Zinn, and her methods have transformed communities in conflict across the globe. It's kind of exactly what we need in this season of life. So today, Emily is here to talk about her 8-step framework, inviting us to listen in ways that deepen our connection, even across the deepest divides, and including the ones that are within ourselves. So Emily, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be with you here, Mandy.
Yeah. So when I was reading your book, there was a line that just caught my attention and made me feel so warm and fuzzy. You said, you can't be open to listen to others until you truly listen to yourself. And I would love to invite you to unpack this for the context of grievers, because someone who is listening, who is grieving in their life, might feel like their inner world is a little too chaotic or safe to listen to. So I'm curious, where should they begin?
I think it's true because when we need to truly listen to somebody, and I'm not just talking about the lip service listening, which we most often do, which is where we're really preloading our verbal gun with ammunition, ready to fire, correct the other person, interrupt, tell them why they're wrong, tell them how we need to help them, or try and solve their problem, or cheer them up. I'm talking about the really profound, deep listening. And to be in a place to do that to someone else, we need to understand what's going on for us. And if we've experienced significant trauma, we might well need a professional to help us. But if we're dealing with other stuff that often might be tied to or associated with somebody else who might be triggering our own stuff, taking the time to understand ourselves what's going on, to listen to ourselves first, can place us in a better position to listen to someone else. And I do think that even with people who are negotiating grief or who've been through something really tough, really listening and stepping into someone else's world can be liberating because it allows us to step outside our own.
Yeah, it's definitely not one of those go and serve other people so that you can finally be served or feel healthy. It is a more intentional and generous want to move into space where you are deeply listening, not just to find what surfaces for you, but to find what surfaces for them and who you two get to become in relationship after listening.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of saying it because if the listening is transactional, if we're only listening in order to get listened to in return, That's not true deep listening. Your speaker will feel that, they will withhold, they won't share so much, and they may not even think so much. Because only when we truly deeply listen can we enable the other person to unleash new creative thoughts that they before hadn't felt safe enough to even imagine. And the same goes for us. We also need to be deeply listened to. But by listening to other people, they are more likely to be in a place to listen to us.
Mm. I'm wondering about how you realized this was a book that needed to come into the world. What is it that caught your attention and helped you realize we're not actually listening to each other?
I mean, as a journalist, I wasn't a great listener. I think that journalists really pride themselves on being a listener, great listener. And I worked in radio for decades because we're dealing with sound. You're collecting sound with your microphone. You're asking people questions, but you're not really listening to their answers. You're just listening long enough to think, yeah, got it. That's what I need to put into my package. We're not being open. And I remember on occasion I wrote about in my book when I was interviewing many years ago at the start of my journalistic career, the president of Ethiopia. And this is a guy who, under his rule, there were a lot of human rights abuses. And I'd met many dissidents in the hotel bar who came up to me and told me about these horrific things. So when I went to interview him, I wanted to nail him. I wanted to hold him to account. And I thought that's what good journalists do. And actually, when he died, the American US Secretary of State said he was a remarkable, thoughtful man. And this didn't mean he didn't commit these human rights abuses, but he was also a very thoughtful person who made a lot of inroads into tackling poverty. I was not interested. And so much so that he sensed the fact I wasn't curious and he shut the interview early. So I really missed the opportunity to explore a very thoughtful person and challenge him, which I could have still done, but from a place of curiosity and openness.
What you're describing sounds so much like journalistic neutrality, which I said off air. I was trained as a journalist when I was young, and that ability to be neutral in a storytelling setting is incredibly hard because no one is neutral in their lives for the most part. It's quite a broad statement, but we come to something with an idea of a better outcome. Certainly with grievers, we come with advice and insight. And I'm thinking about how neutrality as a listener would really transform even the listener. Yes, you're holding space as a witness for the person you're talking with and hearing, but your practice of just observing, just in taking information and holding it not as your own and not making it about you, but just holding it as an act of service and of care is quite a profound act.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Martin Buber, the Jewish theologian, distinguished between I-it relationships, which is what we do most of the time, which is where we listen to extract information, we treat the other person as an object, and I-thou relationships, where we both enter into a different state and we're able to connect far more profoundly beyond even the realm of each of us as individuals. And that feels really exciting and is really nourishing for us, actually, as a listener, as a speaker, and in connection. And it's about respecting the inherent dignity of the other person for their own individual, unique humanity, regardless of what they believe.
That's actually something as a principle that I've tried to build into everything we do with restorative grief. People's dignity matters, and protecting and maintaining their dignity, no matter what they're going through, is so valuable. I want to start with that in mind, how exploring the 8 steps to deep listening and how you took what you've learned and what you've experienced and distilled it down into 8 steps, which sounds like a lot, but also not enough at the same time. So I loved your work in the book and how you described it. And I challenge you to do it well and quickly here.
I'll have a go and then we can see how I do. So
Perfect.
So step one is about creating the space. So first of all, bare minimum psychological safety. The person who's doing the talking And you as a listener needs to feel comfortable so that new thoughts can emerge, which also means if they are a little older, you don't want a bouncy, noisy cafe, you don't want overhead white blue lighting, makes people feel tense. Instead, go for warmer, longer frequency lights, which are side lights, can make people feel much more relaxed. I think that's important. And they can even feel cherished, which is why I spent time with Japanese tea ceremony practitioners who actually rotate the special ceramic cup so that the most beautiful edge is exactly where the speaker can see, and they might put a fresh bamboo leaf on the top and give them a treat. They divide the year into 72 seasons, I think it is, and each season has a different treat, specially chosen for that moment, because they say each moment is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if you think of that when you listen to your speaker, it can be powerful. Step 2 is about listening to yourself first, really uncovering what's going on with you. What are your shadows? What's your agenda? We talked about a little bit about this earlier in order to come to a place to listen. Step 3 is about being present, taking that in breath and that out breath. And there are many different ways that we are individually present. It might be thinking about something, a favorite pet, a childhood holiday home, something that makes us feel, a bowl of pasta and meatballs that makes us feel at home and comfortable so that we can be in a place to open up to someone else. And step 4 is beginning with a gateway of curiosity. So we understand that we do not already know what's going on for the other person, and that we may hear things that will really blow our mind. And having that sense of awe, wonder, interest, curiosity leads the other person to share more, which then enables us to feel more empathy with them and even respect, even if we still disagree. And step 5 is the gaze. So unless you're a First Nation elder and you need people who ideally not to look them in the eye, or you're on the spectrum and don't feel comfortable looking somebody in the eye, there's so much research about the power of the gaze. So virtually is tough because I want to look at your body language naturally to see how you're reacting, and I want to look in the camera, which is why I've actually shrunk your photo of your image so it's very, very small under the camera so I can try and do both. In person, it's a lot easier. And it's not that kind of Michel Foucault, French philosopher. He talked about the gaze as something that prison officers did to prisoners. So they internalized that sense of an overbearing gaze. We're talking about a warm, empathetic, unconditional, positive regard so that the speaker feels relaxed. And often when they're thinking, and I know this being an executive coach, and I've coached people from boardrooms to conflict zones, is that people will often go like this in silence, and they'll have a journey and they'll look away. And because you've been there waiting for them, they will then return after a much, much richer journey. And they may share what they've discovered or they may not, but they know so much more than they knew previously. And that's really wonderful. And step 6 is about holding the silence. Again, many people are fearful of silence. They fear an awkward silence. They think silence is there to intimidate people. In fact, if it's a warm silence, we can all learn to be more comfortable with that kind of silence. And it allows the speaker to gather their thoughts, think more, and allows you as the listener to really make sense of what you've heard in order, step 7, to reflect back. Now, you may have been on an active listening course and you say, yeah, I know, I've just got to say the last thing that the person has said, kind of parrot back, paraphrase. This is not the reflecting back of deep listening. Reflecting back of deep listening is to really use your whole being to listen to the whole of them, and then think about what they've actually said and what they've not said and what their feelings are, even if they've not expressed them, and offer these back with humility to the speaker. And the speaker can say, yeah, and you haven't quite got it. So you can say, I haven't quite captured it, tell me more. Do not ask loads of questions like I used to do as a journalist. Instead, just iteratively capture individual thoughts and meta thoughts that you've heard throughout the conversation. I'm hearing you say that you're both angry and also hugely loving of your mother. Is that right? And it allows them to explore and also to feel it's okay to hold contradictory thoughts because we all do. And having that sense of making people feel it's okay to have these thoughts, accepting that these thoughts are valid for them, even if we don't agree, can be hugely healing for individuals to hear, and then allows us to go deeper, to really try and get to the motivations, the values of people, if it feels comfortable, and then offer them back. And you both come to a far greater understanding of each other and a far deeper connection. And I think particularly for people who are coping with grief, being able to have these profound connections with others stops them feeling so lonely, so shameful, so isolated, and that is healing.
Really, I hope anyone who's listening to this goes back and listens again and again, because having your book in hand is wonderful, but having you so succinctly invite us into all of those steps with examples, clearly you're an expert and you embody what you're talking about. But that is such a beautiful, almost step by step for the concept of attunement, of that nervous system level recognition of another person who can hold space for us when we need it the most. And I think as a grief educator, one of the things I've run into the most is people saying, well, I don't know how to hold space. I don't know how to stay present without getting really uncomfortable. And my response is typically, then get uncomfortable. Do you think they're comfortable with grief? Do you think they're happy and joyful all the time? Or is it possible that they simply need a witness with them in the both and, in the chaos and the joy and the sorrow and the hope and all of the things they're experiencing? And it is difficult to describe how to create an atmosphere of attunement for someone. You've done it so beautifully just now.
Thank you so much. I think that's so beautiful to be able to hold the space for all the chaos and the beauty in people's lives, and to understand that both of the things are possible at the same time, so that people feel truly held and we don't feel the need to come up with platitudes to tell them. So often, what we do is, oh, it's so hard to hear about your miscarriage because do you know what happened to me? How often have we all done that? And what we're doing is we think we're connecting. We're telling them about our dead mother in order to connect with their dead mother. But of course, what we're doing is changing the spotlight from them to us. And they don't feel heard. They feel like, wait a minute, I was only just beginning to unpack my feelings around this. I want more time. And when people are dealing with grief, they need time and presence and attention. And even when you don't have so much time, you can still give presence or say, I really, really want to listen to you, but I've got to run home to take this call in 5 minutes. When else would work for you?
Yeah. That generosity of recognizing I'm going to be inconvenienced by putting myself out there for a person in the same way we would hope someone else could inconvenience themselves for us. And you said something too that, and I believe it was one of the steps specifically, where curiosity brings us in and talks to us about how we don't already know how they're feeling. And I think this is so relevant right now, especially curious with all your experience politically and socially and all the different types of people and walks of life you've researched. How could deep listening as a practice help someone re-engage a relationship where they've experienced estrangement on either side, whether they are the ones who've become estranged from a family member by choice or a friend, or if they are the one who has been left and doesn't have an understanding? Because so much of that estrangement work goes into addressing behaviors and our ego and what we're doing to self-protect. But I wonder if there's an example or a way that you can show how this would support reintegration of that relationship if it's desired.
I mean, I think that when a relationship has gone wrong, as you say, we spend a lot of time, first of all, just being frustrated and telling ourselves why that person is so evil and horrific and misbehaving and why our reaction is completely rational. And we need maybe to go through that and write it, journal it, or go and talk it out in nature and get that out of our system. And then say to ourselves, what's really going on here? What is it that's stopping me? And can I see that individual as a whole person, not just as somebody who has sinned in my eyes, who's done an evil deed, or who doesn't believe what I believe? What else is there about them? What have I really treasured in our relationship so far? What was going on when it went well, and how did that make me feel? And is this something that's worth reinvesting in? Am I willing to place myself? You talked earlier about being in a place of uncomfortableness and experimenting and seeing if it's possible to reconnect. And then, being vulnerable, super helpful when we want somebody else to be vulnerable. And just to say, I'm sorry, I think perhaps I wasn't the kind of friend that you needed at that time. I sensing. Is that right? I mean, that just being honest, being authentic. Don't say things you don't believe in, but take the time to listen to yourself first, to see what room there is for discovering about another perspective. Another good thing, and I'm sure you may have discussed this before, is take the position of the other person and say, if before you meet them, if you were to really believe what they believe, what would you say has gone on about this relationship? It's like the third other perspective. And what would somebody from the outside say about what's going on between both of you? And it takes real courage to step outside ourselves, because it's so much more comfortable to be smug in our self-indignant righteousness. Yeah. So hard to be able to acknowledge that maybe we too played a part in contributing to this breakdown in a relationship. And that kind of pre-thinking allows us the possibility that there may be more than one perspective. And even if we were 100% in the right, is the relationship worth discarding? Or is there something more beautiful, richer, possible if we can if we can reallow ourselves to re-enter that relationship? At least try. And what have we lost? We're no longer in a relationship now. We've only lost our pride. And perhaps pride is something that we can, as we grow older, become a little less attached to.
Pride is worth losing, I say. I think that would be a fair assessment, especially when we are looking at our lives with that both and lens, right? When we are addressing the heaviness that we're carrying, the places that we've been responsible or failed to take responsibility in our lives, and really recognizing this is just rebuilding distress tolerance. This is me confronting the things that I've maybe been afraid to admit. And I also think this is the work of dismantling perfectionism, which to some degree has affected probably everyone. But I think in the background of our lives, perfectionism is what's really keeping us from being vulnerable, honest, available, curious, even moving toward ourselves as we're grieving. I'm
Mm.
curious, with your within your work, you highlighted some things that sabotage deep listening, like trying to win an argument or trying to solve someone else's problem. With regards to just that even lens of perfectionism, which of these traps do you see most often around people who are grieving, or around people who are in direct conflict and need a little bit of a step back to
Mm.
to really approach with intention?
Just before, I just want to make a quick comment about the discussion about re-entering a relationship. There are some people who are just too triggering for us.
Yeah.
Some people who you think may be toxic. Some people who just at this moment in time, it's not healthy for us to be with. And that's fine too. We can have that discussion with ourselves and decide that this isn't the right moment to re-enter that relationship, or perhaps it never will be. And that is true too. And you need to keep yourself safe. I think that's super important. I don't want to encourage people to be open up, and because, deep listening to people is about opening up and being vulnerable. So I just, staying safe first, especially if you're kind of exposed and raw and have recently experienced grief, I think is super, super important. But going back to the traps that really stop us from listening when we are vulnerable or when we're in argument, I mean, that feeling of I am in charge or I have expertise is another one. I know I am right. I know so much about this. There is no need to listen. My job is to instruct, is to convey, is to give advice. So I think that's often. The other one is I don't have the time. And business people often say this to me in a work context, and even, we're all juggling so much, parents, so many of us. And yet, even in, it's not as if we can condense whole hours into mere moments of attention, but it's the quality of attention that we give someone, not just the minutes that we give them, that can be so much more important. Um, I think there's a track that I wrote about saying, I must prove that I am a man. And it's because that there's a lot of gender assumptions that women are listeners and men are speakers, and therefore both men and women, actually the listening, the research evidence, there's not so much difference between the way men and women listen, but we think there is. So a lot of women, when they want to succeed, particularly in the workplace, say, I don't want to be doing this listening, and don't want to be categorized as a passive listener who encourages other people. I want my voice. And men also don't want to be seen as a woman because what they don't understand, that actually when you listen, you co-create the narrative with the speaker. There was some research in this. So people say completely different things. They talk for longer, they talk more about meanings, they go into motivations when they are listened to well, rather than when people are distracted. And therefore, our phone, distraction number one, whether or not it is on or notifications are on, even seeing its glaring screen, even if it's dark, will distract you. Would you like to try some deep listening? I will deep listen to you so we can see how it goes in practice. What do you say? Live
Absolutely,
on air.
Emily. That's my favorite thing to do. Let's go.
Okay, so I'm going to be trying some deep listening, and I'm going to ask you, Mandy, to tell me what food reminds you of home.
Chicken and dumplings. Chicken and dumplings was a recipe. So my mom was a chef, and when we were younger, she would invite us into the kitchen all the time. And of course, my sister and I were quite a few years apart. And so it was not really at the same time that we were both there. But I remember significant time where I would come over and hop in to help with what she was making, or we'd be eating something brand new almost every week. There was not a whole lot of repeat meals because she was a chef that didn't write anything down. So she had to make up her recipes again on the fly. But chicken and dumplings is one of those standards that just stayed with us. And so when I was old enough to learn how, I remember thinking like, okay, first of all, the dumplings start with Bisquick. This feels like cheating, especially for someone who's so brilliant in the kitchen. But it became very obvious that this was intentional. There was a little more that she added. And, over the years, I would make it and call her every single time I did. It was a perfect, I'm feeling sick. Okay, I can make a giant pot, chicken and dumplings for anyone who wants. And of course, as I got older and my competitive side came out, I would say, Mom, I made it, but I think it's better. And she was such a love. She would say, Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is better. But yeah, that meal will forever be imprinted in my memory.
So I'm hearing you say, Mandy, that your mum was a chef, and there's a lot of pride in all these amazing dishes different dishes she cooked every night, and didn't write them down. So there was a lot of invention and creativity. And yet the chicken and dumplings was something at the core of what she gave you and gave her love to you. And even if the recipe was kind of unusual, you didn't expect it, but something you yourself took on and was able to offer back, and you admire her for being able to not have that pride we were talking about earlier, for being willing to say that you, who aren't a chef, make better chicken dumplings. And that feels like a beautiful gift of love from her to you.
Yeah, it really does. It's something that when my own daughter was old enough to say what she wanted or didn't want to eat, and she said, I don't really like the dumplings. When I tell you my heart shattered and I thought, well, that's the end of it. I can never make this again. That moment truly happened. It took of course, a few years before I could say, let's try it again. Because your Nana loved this and you loved your Nana. And she was almost 2 when my mom died. And so she didn't have a lot of memories. And yeah, the way that she showed up through the chicken and dumplings, gosh, we could write a whole book. That might be where the book Chicken Soup for the Soul comes from, inspired by moments like that where there really is an embodiment in a bowl of soup, which ironically, my mom hated soup. I I make soup all the time, and I remember when I was younger and I would tell her about all the different ones I'd come up with. She's like, "Ugh, that's not a meal. That's not a meal." But this one, chicken and dumplings, now that was a full meal. Didn't even have sides, no salad, nothing. That was the full thing. I love that you named how her humility really did show up for me too, as she, our whole family were cooks. Everybody loved, we would have competitive holidays where there'd be dueling turkeys and dueling stuffing, not because there were that many people, but because we all had something we wanted to bring. And there was never a winner. It was just now we have so much to enjoy and sit around the table with. But I just love that acknowledgement of, yeah, of course, you can do this too. That lesson as a parent now looking back and saying, of course, I'm not trying to stand in your way and say, live up to my expectations, live up to your expectations. What do you want? Who are you becoming? All from a bowl of chicken soup.
And so it's that sense of the gift of conveying to her child that you could go further than her
Mm.
through the chicken soup. And therefore, when initially your daughter rejected the chicken soup, it was like, how could you? This is that my heritage. This is my mother's legacy. And
Yeah.
yet you also caught yourself. There's a bit of humor there that you realized that it was okay for her not to love chicken soup and you were able to give it to her again. And the sense of your family showing love for each other by making double stuffing, double turkey wasn't about competition, but it was about a game that you all played together and respected each other's contributions. And that feels so kind of nourishing for you as a person, as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say too, not to take us out of the deep listening moment, but the way that you are reflecting back and also connecting the dots for someone who is neurodivergent, who also in just general as a storyteller, knowing that our memories connect in such different and funny synapses, right? The things that fire together and come up all at once. It's incredibly validating for a person to feel like this wasn't the story I started thinking I would tell, and it's certainly a story that I've told before, but having the space held while going through my own emotional experience and going through my own, you know, just expression of the grief that is there. Because now when I make chicken and dumplings, that's just for us. She's not here, but she is, but she's not, but she is, but she's not. And going even further and realizing like, oh, well, I have her chef's knife. Of all the things that remained of her belongings, most of them went to my sister because she was younger and building a household. And I just said, I need mom's knife, and I still have it. And every now and then I can remember times I'll go in the kitchen and pick it up and think, oh, I'm just cooking. It's no big deal. But quite literally, when I've made chicken and dumplings, there is a moment of like, this is a sacred moment. This is holy ground. Just take a minute, cry if you need to, make sure the knife is sharp and safe, but be in this moment, be present, all again through chicken and dumplings. Hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing so openly, Mandy. And I feel now, had I asked you questions, I might have said, where did you grow up? Or was it a Jewish chicken soup? Or, loads of
Yeah.
questions I could have asked you, but I didn't. And instead, because I didn't, grasp that steering wheel and take you down where I wanted to go, but let you go down where you wanted to go, you were able to come to a place of meaning. And I was just, just not just using my intellectual brain. I'm pretty tired today, but just using my heart to intuitively make sense of what you were saying and draw it together and present it back to you for you then to go deeper and make sense and come up with the story of the knife, for example, for a place where you've created your own ritual to remember your mother by and be in her presence in a very intentional way, which is a really beautiful moment to connect with her and the memory and still recognize the fact that she's living on through you and your making of this chicken and dumpling.
Yeah, and I just want to also acknowledge too, there's a sense of weightiness to deep listening, right? When you list 8 steps and we list 8 things that might sabotage you, it feels there's a sense of pressure that can come in. What you just did, that story I shared, that was 5, 6 minutes. And yet there's so much depth and there's so much availability and vulnerability that's given space to exist. And I think that that's an important task. It doesn't matter how long the book is, it doesn't matter how long standing the relationship is. When there is safety, and psychological safety always gets talked about in the workplace when it comes to people, but I bring it into personal relationship in the home all the time, because if you want us to open up and trust, you have to create an environment that's trustworthy. To do
Yeah.
so in 5 to 6 minutes is a gift, and it is something that can be learned as well.
Yeah, there's so much research that evidences that as long as we believe we can get better, we can. We
Mm.
need just to take small baby steps. We need to, first of all, listen to somebody who is not very challenging, who is not somebody we disagree with, and then reflect on afterwards. And I've got a little worksheet in the book to encourage and invite people to reflect on their own listening and watch if they too judgy, see what's going on and let that go. It might be that they're proud simply for the intention to deeply listen, even if it went out the window once they start listening, because that is the beginning. And the awareness that we are not listening well is itself something that we can then have a choice in the next conversation. And that's what's so great about deep listening. When we see ourselves going off track, either in a conversation or when we reflect back on it, there's the moment to begin again and try a new conversation. There's always a moment to begin again.
Yeah. I heard you say that starting with someone who's less confrontational or less activating, probably not a child that you are responsible for, would be a good start. Picking someone who is gentle, maybe someone who is easy to talk to on a normal day, and neither of you are in crisis. Just kidding. We're always all some of us in crisis, but being able to very gently pick someone who feels like a hug or like sunshine, to practice this and to truly say, I'd like to practice the skill of deep listening. Can we be awkward and do it together? There's that discomfort again coming back around, but potentially changing the way that you communicate with one another, and in by proxy, changing the way we communicate in our entire families. It's a brilliant skill.
Yeah, that is so great. If you can find a deep listening buddy and you read the book and then you give it to them so they can read it and
Yeah.
then you practice with each other, that is perfect. And you then can help each other to also, for example, if either of you is about to have a difficult conversation, you can practice with the other person. So if I were paired with you and we were deep listening buddies, Mandy, I'd say to you, I've got this difficult conversation at work with my boss. And this is a situation in 2 minutes, you will be able to act like my boss and trigger me. I guarantee, because I've done a lot of this in workshops with people. Just 2 minutes of briefing. I always say, have a bit of fun. Don't just say what I've told you. Just imagine what my boss is like. And I mean, I once was training BBC colleagues it was in Nairobi in Kenya, and a woman was trying to deeply listen to her mother, who she lived with, who was a real bully and made her clean up the house all the time after she finished her day job at the BBC. And as she was briefing somebody to play the role of her mother and try to listen to her, she said, I can't listen to her because she's so wrong. She never ever supports me, and never, because the person was acting her mother so realistically that she wasn't able to listen to her. And having these pre-conversations with your deep listening buddy can really enable you to have the conversation when it matters most, when it's really tricky.
Gosh, I'm just imagining book clubs transitioning away from fictional monthly books to quarterly non-fictional practical books like this, and then becoming like life support for one another instead of just escapism, which, don't get me wrong, I love escape. I read a lot of fiction books in the world. And if my book club is listening, this does not mean I don't want to keep reading all the murder mysteries with you. But there would be something incredibly powerful to people who truly commit to reading a book together and letting it transform the way that they move through the world.
Yeah, and it's also great you don't have to do it all the time. So you can have that gossip and discuss recipes and
Yeah.
just, that's, I think people sometimes, oh God, like I certainly don't listen all the time. Ask my friends and family. And I don't even sometimes listen when I really need to. Ask my friends and family. But, giving us the opportunity, and it is like any muscle, we can learn and we can develop and we can go through a journey and we can reflect and get feedback. That's a really great way of learning. I could have said to you after that conversation, what did it feel like for you, Mandy?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what it felt like for me was a warm hug. It felt like an invitation to be honest and present and to even question my own conclusions and things that I maybe haven't thought about in a really long time, which is an incredible gift.
And it's a gift that all of us can learn and practice. And that's what I find so exciting. And
Mm.
to me, with, the crisis of polarization and loneliness, because we're all so desperate to be heard, what feels so inspiring is that people can learn deep listening and practice it with their neighbors, with strangers. And
Mhm.
it can be so impactful. Can I just tell you a very quick little story? I was at the pharmacy recently collecting some drugs for my daughter, yeah? And there was a lady who was also waiting for her drugs. She was seated on a plastic chair. It's NHS, National Health Service Pharmacy, just round the corner in London. And the lady behind the counter said, "What's the date of birth of your daughter?" And I went, 3rd of July, 21. "Are you sure?" she said. And then I said, "No, no, no, what do I mean? 3rd of July, 2001. And the lady behind me said, "What do you mean? You don't know the date of your daughter's birth? How could you not know how old your daughter is?" And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty silly. I agree with you. I really, as a mother, should know when my daughter's born." And we had a bit of a laugh and we had a little chat. And she said, "Yeah, I'm really proud of my grandmother because, she's just celebrating her 95th or 6th birthday. I can't remember what it was." And I said, "You're proud? That's exciting." She says, "Yeah, I'm proud." And I sensed there was more. And so I said, "I'm sensing that you're proud, but there's also something else going on that's sort of taking that away." And she said to me, "I'm worried. I'm worried that I'm going to die before my grandmother." And then we spoke more. We spoke about her condition and she started to cry. And then she apologized for crying. And I said, "It's fine to cry. I cry. We all cry." And she said, "Thank you for listening." And I left the pharmacy, walked back to my house, and I had a sense that she hadn't been heard and that she was carrying the heavy weight of what was going on and the loss, the predicted loss of her own life. And the gift that we can give people, even strangers, to share what's going on for them, feels to me something so empowering, even in the space of a few minutes. And I think it was the vulnerability that I demonstrated when I was not defensive when she teased me about not knowing about my daughter's birth date, because it was pretty silly, she was right. Then allowed her to be vulnerable, something unlocked in her and she felt safe to be vulnerable. And it felt really meaningful for me to be able to have, even in moments, that encounter with a stranger. Because there's a lot of research that when we listen, we feel like we're helping, we're empowering somebody else. And that's good for us as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing you recognize that deep listening doesn't require generations of connection and years of intimacy and understanding, that it is a practice available to anyone at any time, with the caveat of humility leading the way, because you're exactly right. I mean, I've forgotten my daughter's birthday many times and occasionally will scold myself for not knowing her social security number or some other important detail that I have to like look it up. And I think that being able to say, like, of course I can laugh at myself. I can take this less seriously for the moment, for the sake of others who are in space where everything feels very serious and there isn't levity and there isn't space to release some of that grip they've got on fears about the future or whatever else they're carrying. That story just makes it very evident that this is a practice anyone can start.
Yeah, that's so true because if we're not listened to, we're in a state of contraction, aren't we? We're kind of tense, we're holding it in. And when we're heard, we're able just to let a little bit of that go. I would say, though, that when you deeply listen to somebody, they may share more than you are ready to bear.
Hmm.
And safety yourself is, really important. So you might need to say, I really want to hear you and be authentic. And at the same time, myself, I'm feeling a little vulnerable and I can't quite bear this. Can we talk at another time? Can I take a break? Are there other resources I can help other people who might be in a better place? Being honest and knowing what it's right for us to bear. And then, of course, also if somebody shares something confidential, being treating that with respect and in confidence, because people end up sharing a lot more than they intended to when you deeply listen. So the ethical, that's why I've got 2 chapters on the book on the ethical stuff.
Yeah, it turns out when people realize I'm about to be heard, they share things that have never been shared, and it can be very disruptive and very scary. And that's why your work with deep listening and my work with brief literacy is so crucial and intermingled, creating environments where there is connection and safety and security and a sense of belonging where we can belong to ourselves and to one another, but without inadvertent harm. I think that that's so necessary. Emily, your work is lovely. This has been such a joy. And I would love for you to tell our listeners where they can find more information about you and your work and get a copy of your book.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Mandy. It's been a really beautiful conversation. I feel really warmed by our connection and our conversation. So you can find out more about me on my website, emilykasriel.com, and read articles I've written and other things about deep listening. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and you can buy the book. And I'd love you to buy the book because the more people that read it, the more booksellers will promote it and more people will then have the benefit of being heard. So this is the book. And you can find it on Amazon or your local bookshop, wherever you get your book. So I would be hugely grateful if you would get it at the library and if you would lend it to a friend after you finish reading it as well, so more people can do the deep listening. That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My copy is right here too. And I'm like ready to buy a second so that I can go stick it in a little free library in my town and make sure that just the random person gets a hold of it too. So
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Mandy.
Emily, thank you. And I'm so grateful for your work.
Thank you so much. And I'm grateful for yours too, Mandy. All the very best.
Thank you for listening to episode 195 of Restorative Grief. Sweet listener, I don't know if you could hear the tears in my eyes when sharing about my mom's chicken and dumpling soup, but they were real and they were there and they were honest. I've told that story so many times, but the humility and invitation from Emily to share part of my story was beyond cathartic. As humans, we've lost the art of connection in the last few decades, and I believe it is insight like Emily's that will help us return to one another. So be sure to order your copy of Emily's book as soon as possible and request that your library get a copy and start a book club around it and put it in all of your neighborhood's free libraries. And maybe buy everyone you know a copy for Christmas. It's not excessive, it's just required reading for all of us now. Check out the show notes to learn more about Emily's work and how you can go a little bit deeper with our own workbook found on Patreon. If you have any questions about this episode or anything else you've heard on the podcast, feel free to reach out at mandykpart.com or via social media. Thank you again to all the financial supporters of the podcast. You are amazing and you make such a difference. Please be sure to subscribe as well so you never miss an episode, and leave a 5-star review and tell all of your friends. It's so easy. When you're listening, you can just hit share on your phone and send them this episode. We make it as simple as possible, right? And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.